Hello there, Richard Bowser here once again from Property Investor News, and this afternoon I'm here in London at the Landlord Investment Show. Come across Ben Beadle, who is the CEO, Ben, of just about the National Residential Landlords Association, obviously the largest landlord association in the country by far, 110,000 members.
That's right.
Yeah, and growing.
And growing, believe it or not, and growing. Our members have got almost 1 million properties, Richard, so it's a big deal.
It absolutely is. So Ben, we're at the show. We've literally just a few hours ago heard Rachel Reeves talk about the budget and what she sees the government needs to do, and obviously implications for everybody, and some positives and maybe some stuff which, So let's talk about that first of all.
I mean, it's much like my school report. It could be better, Richard, but it probably is not as bad as we feared. I think the headline couple of things are really around additional rate of stamp duty that's moved from 3 to 5%. We see that as a really negative move for obvious reasons. The way that you stimulate growth is not to have barriers. It's to really incentivise people to come into the market. So that's problematic. That will hit supply and it will hit renters badly. But on the counter side, we haven't seen some of the changes to capital gains tax that we feared. And so those looking at disposing of assets will be reassured that it's at least unchanged as it stands at the moment. Well, we've seen some other things. We've seen £500 million put into the affordable homes budget. We've seen some tweaks around local authorities being able to keep the receipts from right to buy. And we've also seen local authorities have the ability to make above inflation rent increases, which I thought was quite an interesting move. As I'm at pains to remind people, something has to be, there's no such thing as a free lunch. You've got to be able to pay for things somehow, and I think this is recognition that the government has finally realised. Well,
I mean, obviously, the legacy of COVID is there's a lot of debt that has to be dealt with, not just in the UK, but in almost every country worldwide. So we've had the budget, and it's not as bad as many had feared, as you say.
The devil will be in the detail.
Absolutely, of course. It's the next 2 or 3 days as the guys get into it all. And so CGT, obviously, a lot of people, some people have been getting out the market, been selling up some of their portfolio in expectation that they were going to get clobbered in CGT to be aligned with income tax rates, and now that is not happening. So that really is positive. But at the same time, as you say, extra 2% on the additional tax for purchasing investment property or a second property is also going to have an impact. And that, as you say, that's restricting new supply at a time when in many locations we're
crying out for homes, aren't we?
Absolutely.
And you've only got to look at the Institute for Fiscal Studies, who say that the more harshly investors are taxed, the more expensive it is and becomes for renters. So I understand the attractiveness of tinkering with stamp duty, but in reality it'd be far better to incentivise people to bring empty homes or dilapidated homes back into use and use stamp duty as a bit of a lever. And we say that actually that will raise £10 billion for the economy if you do that, because of all of the knock-on benefits, as well as create a significant amount of homes. So it's a missed opportunity in that regard.
So I mean, there's other stuff that around employers and national insurance. Some of it for small businesses actually is a positive, but for many businesses, obviously, extra employment cost, etc. So that I suppose really, as far as the budget's concerned, is a summary of it from the point of view of...
I guess from the point of view of housing, those are the key takeaways. Obviously, there will be horses for courses in terms of what other things will impact our members and other bits and pieces like that. I see that they have also committed to keeping corporation tax, for example, at its current rate until the next election. So those that are incorporated.
25% now?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So that might come as good news for those that are incorporated.
Yes, and maybe we're expecting,
Indeed.
So we're at the Landlord Investment Show, and we've spoken on a number of occasions this year, webinars, etc.
Yeah.
And clearly the big thing on many people's minds at this moment, apart from today's budget, is going to be the ongoing progress, or otherwise, of the now named Renters' Rights Bill, the Labour government's initiative to do what it says on the tin. So where is this at now, Ben, and what are the key things that people need to be aware of? We could spend all day talking about.
I mean, we really could. But there's a lot of concern about it,
yes,
Richard, and actually my seminar earlier was absolutely packed out, standing room only. And it's not so much some of the things that are in it, it's more the uncertainty around it. And you can see people that are really sort of holding back on their decisions until they know exactly what this looks like. Clarity,
well,
absolutely.
same with the budget today.
Indeed.
You've got people that have preempted, expecting that CGT was going to be applied, and it's not.
So that will drive different decisions,
absolutely.
won't it? It will drive different decisions. And I think the Renters' Rights Bill is exactly that. Now, for those of you that maybe have been under a rock for the last few years, or few months, there's a large amount of what was in the Renters' Rights Bill that's effectively been replicated.
Yes.
The Renters' Reform Bill that's been replicated in the Renters' Rights Bill, but it's much more onerous as far as landlords are concerned, and that's the problem. And so the key takeaways for me is really we have to remember that we have a strong Labour government with a significant majority. And so whilst we were very successful at getting some changes when it was the Renters' Reform Bill, I'll get my teeth in a minute, actually I would expect any further changes to be fairly modest to the Renters' Rights Bill. So it's at committee stage at the moment. I gave evidence.
You did.
A few days ago. I can't actually remember.
I think it was last week. I actually tuned in on it.
Oh, did you?
I was one of the nerds that actually tuned in on to hear you and
Teresa Wallace.
Very. Excellent presentation from both of you. Very professional in the way that it was put across, and you argued your corner really well.
But there are only a few things you can go into bat on.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's lots of landlords that would like to rip it up and start.
Of course they would,
again.
but that's not the reality.
No, it's not the reality.
The votes of the general population brought in this government, and clearly
they're delivering on their manifesto commitment, as they said they would. And you can't knock them for that. I guess the issue from our perspective is that you still need landlords to have confidence, and there isn't a lot of confidence out there. And so there's a few areas that we would like to see a nip and a tuck on. Firstly is the way that it's implemented, which is sort of a big bang date, retrospective, and to tenancies going forwards. We think that should be separated. We think it should apply to new tenancies, and then perhaps in a year's time or so, existing tenancies get caught, so that it gives the sector time to adjust. If you're a big letting agent, you're going to be it's going to be a nightmare. It's going to be a nightmare. And so this is not about delaying it, it's about the practicalities of getting it right.
Of implementing it.
That's right. And also the knock-on effect of that is things like the first-tier tribunal and the court system are simply not geared up.
You've been on about this. Obviously, you are a magistrate yourself, and so you understand the whole process. You see it firsthand.
I do, absolutely do. And the issue around the Section 13 process with the abolition of the fixed term is you'll only be able to increase rent on your periodic tenancy once a year via a Section 13 notice, and there's no disincentive for the tenant to challenge that. And that's a problem. I'm not saying that tenants shouldn't be able to challenge unfair rent increases. No. I'm saying that there is a practical point here that the first-tier tribunal is not ready for the tidal wave that's going to be coming its way. And we say that's not in the interests of either tenants or landlords.
No.
And the third thing, aside from the tribunal, is the impact that it will have on the student sector.
Yes,
and there's a lot of questions here today.
Absolutely.
Obviously, what we had before was a ground that applied to any type of student tenancy, and we also had the moratorium that applied to any type of tenancy where you couldn't give notice in the first 4 months. Now it's periodic from day one, and the ground only applies to HMOs, and we want to see that reversed so that at least there is some protection about, not just for the student market actually, but against set-up costs, But we also don't want to create the PRS as being an Airbnb via the back door.
No. Well, I mean, students come in September, October. And
well, they won't be able to predict when the houses are available, and so it's as much a problem for landlords as it is for renters.
Yes.
And that's the point that we'd really like to see some movement on.
Yeah. So, it remains to be seen.
Well, the committee stage is due to conclude by the end of November, as I understand it.
From where we are, about another 4 or 5 weeks. Yeah.
Exactly, and people can submit evidence.
Yes,
so
I was going to say yes.
Encourage them absolutely to do so. So you can find details on the NRLA website, nrla.org.uk. We've got a whole section on renters' rights. Pick the bits that you're most passionate about, and make your submission. Write to your MP, get them to write to the Secretary of State. Use your MPs to have your voice heard. Let us know what response that you get back. It's really time to mobilise.
Yes.
And what we can't do is sit around bleating.
No.
We've got to get actively involved, whether we like it or not, and have our voices heard.
This is going to have a profound effect.
It's the biggest change for 30 years.
Absolutely. So a lot of, I was at another event last night, and one very positive comment was made that a lot of these MPs that have just come into Parliament are there for the first time.
Yes.
Some of them are relatively young, relatively inexperienced, lacking knowledge of some of the detail around this. So, taking action and putting forward your submissions and stating your reasons why in its existing form things should be amended at this stage before they become law.
And bear in mind that we've already seen some amendments around the fixed term that have been submitted by the Conservative Party. That's been rejected already. And so the Minister is under no obligation to accept any of those amendments because they know that they can vote it through how it is. And that's the stark reality. You mentioned about new Labour MPs, and that's really important, Richard. So some of the work that we've been doing is identifying that new cohort so that we can brief them about the private rented sector, about the contribution that responsible landlords make, and the need for balance when it comes to reforming the sector. So we're doing it. I would encourage individuals to do it, and I'd encourage individuals to also write into the Bills Committee. You can find details on our website or on the government website as well.
Right, excellent. Okay, Ben, so short, sharp discussion today. Anything very specifically you want to add people need to be aware of, and we will no doubt be talking again in the months ahead?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is, it feels like we're Groundhog Day, doesn't it?
It does.
Every time we're at one of these events, there's some sort of terrible storm that is forced upon the sector, and people are just going to have to, I'm afraid, get used to the changing dynamic. We haven't really touched on EPCs and energy. No. Well, that's another train crash ready to happen.
No, we just in a debate earlier myself. I was on a panel, and that is a big cause of concern. The idea of achieving a C by 2030, which has now been raised again, and that is something. Which is a significant cost.
It is, and we're not climate change deniers, but it's also very difficult to retrofit certain types of properties.
Well, I think the numbers are around 850,000, as I understand, Victorian era, whatever, properties that will need 15, 20, 25, 30, even more £1,000 spent on them.
And the thing with energy actually is that those changes, whilst people on renters' rights can form a view about whether they want, whether they like what they're getting and, vote with their feet, actually the energy direction is a very straightforward financial calculation. If you're an asset in a particular part of the world where the asset value is 60 or 70 grand, well, it don't stack up, does it? It's as simple as that.
Spending 20 to get a £60,000 property up to achieve the economics of the madhouse. In North Oxfordshire, near to where I live, similar properties, mid-terrace, red brick, Victorian, 850, 900,000. So spending a not dissimilar amounts of money to achieve a C, given that you're future-proofing your investment for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, then it's an investment calculation that can make sense.
Well, we'd like to see the Minister sort of taper whatever cap there is based on either the average local rent or the asset value in that particular area, because 10 grand or whatever the cap happens to be, as you say, in London or Chelsea or wherever,
Yes.
it has a very different impact
Absolutely.
to some areas of, say, the northwest or the northeast.
Yeah. Ben, just before we finish, we're just going back to the student sector. So the 4 months thing from June in terms of a landlord being able to give notice, can you just clarify on that? 'Cause I should have mentioned this earlier.
So that's a big deal, and the area in relation to the ground is problematic because we are concerned that maybe even in its current form, it won't work effectively. Rather than get in, it is a bill at this stage, Richard. So rather than get into the specifics, we see this as being an area that needs attention, not just in terms of the time frames and when it expires, but also who it applies to. Because we're seeing landlords holding back about renting to 1 or 2 bedroom properties to students because the ground won't apply.
Yeah, and that's going to impact on the postgraduate market in particular.
Absolutely.
Isn't it?
So we say that actually that whole area needs a little bit of refinement, and of course it's very much like strawberries and cream. You can't have one without the other. The ground is useful, but if you haven't got some element of a fixed period, you wouldn't have it by itself. And so I think it does need to come as a package. And that's a big area that we're working on at the moment.
Okay, well let's hope optimistically that we can see some movement there. Fingers crossed, etc.
Fingers crossed.
Ben Beadle, National Residential Landlords Association. Once again, thanks for your time here today. Thank you.
Good to see you.
Thank you.